Hello, listeners, and welcome back to this new episode. Today, we are going to be talking about self-sabotage, which is actually very common, and we don't even realize that we're doing it. So let's dive in. Leadership is hard, but let's be honest. Sometimes we make it harder on ourselves. Have you ever found yourself at 11 p.m., exhausted after back-to-back meetings, staring at an overdue email that you have been putting off all week? It feels overwhelming, and you think, I'll handle it tomorrow. But tomorrow comes, and that task still looms, stealing more mental energy than it should. Or maybe you're in a team meeting and a colleague takes credit for an idea that you originally proposed. And you can feel your blood boiling and that frustration rising. But instead of addressing it, you stay quiet and replay the moment over and over in your head for the rest of the day. Or maybe what about a tough conversation you've been avoiding? Maybe it's giving direct feedback to an underperforming team member, or asking your boss for clarity on shifting priorities. The longer you delay, the more it festers, leaving you anxious and stuck. Do any of these scenarios sound familiar? Most of my listeners are balancing the constant demands of team management, tight deadlines, resource restriction. And while you might excel at solving problems and keeping things on track, there's often a voice in your head whispering doubts. Am I really capable? Can I handle this level of ambiguity? Those moments of second guessing your abilities can leave you feeling stuck, even if outwardly it looks like you're thriving. But the thing is that those patterns of procrastination, frustration, avoidance aren't just bad habits. Those are actually signs of self-sabotage. And these behaviors often stem from saboteurs. A saboteur is an internal voice that hijacks your thoughts and your actions. And if left to act on its own, those saboteurs quietly undermine your confidence, your performance, and your relationships. Today, I want to dive into the 10 saboteurs. These are based on a book and a framework written by Shirzad Chamine. And I use this in my coaching. It'll be very high level. I'm going to touch briefly on the 10 saboteurs, what the saboteur looks like and how it impacts you. And my goal isn't to overwhelm you, but simply to bring some awareness and help you recognize the patterns so that you can take steps towards breaking free from them. And in a later episode, I will address how to lessen their impact and their negative effects on you. In the meantime, if you do want more information, don't hesitate to reach out. So a saboteur specifically are mental patterns rooted in a survival mechanism that we developed in childhood. It's a strength, so something that helped us in childhood during a very difficult moment. But as we've grown into adults, we are actually overusing that, misusing that, abusing that, and it ends up showing up as a self-sabotaging behavior because we've really pushed that survival mechanism to a limit. And every single person has 2 or 3 dominant saboteurs. And the first step to overcoming them is awareness. Now, there is one master saboteur. We call it the judge. The judge criticizes you. The judge criticizes others and criticizes circumstances. But the judge rarely acts alone. It activates an accomplice saboteur, and that amplifies, those two working together amplify self-sabotaging behavior. It usually starts with judge. The judge is, for example, berating somebody for something, and your accomplice saboteur shows up to help you deal with it. So when they work together, that's when you end up self-sabotaging yourself. So I'm going to go in briefly to the 10 saboteurs. And as you listen, I encourage you to reflect on which ones resonate the most with you. And again, as a disclaimer, I'm a positive intelligence coach and use this content in my coaching, but it was developed by Shirzad Shameen. So let's start with the master saboteur, the one that all of us have, which is the judge. The judge is that inner critic that finds fault with everything, with you, with others, with circumstances. So picture this, you make a mistake at work, maybe you miss a deadline, and instead of focusing on a solution, your judge berates you. How could you let this happen? You're not good enough. See, I told you so. It creates guilt and stress that block you from thinking clearly and activating your solution-oriented part of the brain. So the judge is quick to criticize others, which also can create tension in your relationships and erode trust. And it's always looking for what is wrong. And that is exhausting. And my clients are amazed that when they start thinking about it, about how much they're judging themselves, others, or circumstances, they didn't realize how much they were doing it. And I do want to say also that there is a big difference between judging and discerning. It's the energy that's behind it. So that is the first one. And then there are 9 accomplice saboteurs. So there's the controller. This saboteur thrives on anxiety and the need to take charge. It tells you that unless you are in control, everything will fall apart. Imagine micromanaging a project because you're convinced that no one else will get it right. You end up alienating your team who feel disempowered, resentful, and you carry the burden of doing everything yourself. The controller convinces you that's the only way to succeed, but it's a trap that leads to burnout and frustration. So the controller is one of my personal top saboteurs. Secondly, for the 9 accomplice saboteurs, there is the avoider. This saboteur focuses on keeping things comfortable, avoiding conflict or difficult tasks. Think about the team member who's consistently underperforming. You know you need to address it, but instead you avoid the conversation, hoping the problem will resolve itself or hoping that somebody else will take care of it. That doesn't happen. The problem festers. The avoider creates a cycle of procrastination and unresolved issues that only grow larger and more stressful over time. Next, we have the hyper-achiever. That is also one of my top saboteurs. And the hyper-achiever ties your self-worth to your achievements, pushing you to constantly do more. So at first, it might sound like a strength, but when it's overused, that's when it comes at a cost. So think about skipping a family dinner to work late on a project that could actually wait until morning. The hyperachiever convinces you that success equals worthiness, but it leaves you actually disconnected from things that truly matter. The 4th accomplice saboteur is the pleaser. And this might resonate with you if you often put others' needs ahead of your own. You agree to take on extra work. This is a big one for a lot of my clients who have been recently promoted into a manager position. They take on extra work to avoid disappointing someone, or they want their team members to like them. But they do that when they're already stretched too thin. And the pleaser tells you that this actually makes you a really good leader, but in reality, it leads to burnout and resentment. You're not just overcommitting, you're also sacrificing your own well-being. And you're not doing your team any favors. They could be learning and growing, and you are not giving them that opportunity. Next is the stickler. The stickler demands perfection. Imagine spending hours tweaking a presentation that is already good enough. You're delaying other important tasks. The Stickler convinces you that anything less than perfect is unacceptable. But this obsessive focus on detail slows progress and frustrates your team. Then there's the hyper-rational. The hyper-rational might show up as an over-reliance on logic, and it usually dismisses. It usually doesn't take into account emotions. So, for example, when a team member expresses concerns over something, you might brush them off as illogical or not reasonable. And that actually creates a lot of distance and distrust in your relationships because your teams feel unheard and undervalued. The seventh accomplice saboteur is the hyper-vigilant, always scanning for what could go wrong. It's like having a radar that's constantly on high alert. And of course, while being prepared is important and thinking through different scenarios is important, it actually creates unnecessarily anxiety and stifles a lot of creativity. So imagine delaying a project because you're focused on contingencies for every worst case scenario. It's exhausting and counterproductive. There's also the restless saboteur. This is also me, somebody who craves constant activity and stimulation. And it's a voice that pushes you to start 3 new initiatives at once, but you actually don't finish any of them. So while your energy and enthusiasm can be really contagious if you have this saboteur, it often results in a lack of effectiveness and could leave important strategic things incomplete. And finally, there's the victim saboteur. The victim thrives on self-pity, internal struggles. So imagine, for example, receiving constructive feedback, and instead of using it to improve, you dwell on how unfair it is. The victim drains your energy, pushes others away, as they feel helpless to support you, and most people don't want to be around you or around people with a victim mentality. So those are the 10 saboteurs. And as I describe them, I'm sure that a few resonated with you. We all have them, but they are absolutely not a reflection of your value, simply patterns that you've developed over time. So what's next? Ask yourself, which of these saboteurs show up most often for you? When does it tend to appear? How does it impact my work, my well-being, and my relationships? So the only step is to start noticing it, because awareness is key to breaking those patterns, and so that you can shift towards behaviors that serve you better. In an upcoming episode, I will talk about what to do once you have built awareness around your saboteurs. It is 100% possible to lessen their impact once you recognize the patterns. I know it might feel like they are an ingrained part of who you are, but they're not. It is simply a behavioral pattern that can be changed. And just imagine leading with confidence and excitement and intention instead of self-doubt or fear. So if you are curious to know about your saboteurs, there is a link in the show notes. You can take a free saboteur assessment, and the assessment will help you identify your dominant saboteurs, and it will go into a lot more depth than what I did today. And by gaining that clarity, you'll actually begin to recognize the patterns so that you can change them. So once again, link is in the show notes. Saboteur assessment test. It is eye-opening. All of my clients love it. It is completely free. Thank you for tuning in to Promoted, Stop Doubting, Start Leading. Until next time, go be brilliant.